Welcome back to another edition of Up in the Air. I'm Meredith Fish.
And I'm Hunter Williams.
Hunter, it is great to have you at the desk this week, and we're thrilled to have you as part of our team.
Thank you very much, Meredith. I'm looking forward to a great year alongside you guys.
Thanks. Well, we have a jam-packed show ahead of us for you this week.
That's right. The Weather Risk Management Club will be here with our first risk report of the semester.
Plus, Ryan will have a look at the weather pattern for next week.
But first, let's take a look at the latest news and information from the Weather Enterprise and Climate World. Here is Update in the Air. We all know that our phones can do many things, but recent data published by a group called Raincell Africa could be putting mobile phones to a new meteorological use. Rainfall monitoring is crucial in many areas across Africa for agriculture, water management, drought and flood warnings, amongst many other things. However, in these same areas, observation networks often fail to provide reliable information. Fortunately, it appears that more reliable data could be on the way. Mobile phones, as well as transmitting signals, also record signal disturbances, and oftentimes these disturbances are due to precipitation. The aim of Raincell Africa is to capitalize on this data to improve rainfall monitoring as well as spatialization across Africa. A study involving a regional carrier and several universities assessed the accuracy of this rainfall observing method, determined that 95% of rainfall events can be detected. This marked the first time that the technique had been quantitatively evaluated, and the results were published in the Geophysical Research Letters Journal. With 20% of the world's land area having a mobile phone network covering 90% of the population, these discoveries could be monumental for the future of rainfall observations, especially in less developed areas.
The American Psychiatric Association defines phobia as a marked fear or anxiety about a specific object or situation. Natural environment phobias, including weather-related conditions like the fear of thunderstorms, clouds, hurricanes, snow, cold, or wind, add up to the second highest prevalence rate among phobia subtypes. These natural environment phobias contribute to 9 to 12% of all phobias, with storm phobia alone occurring in 2 to 3% of the general population. New research is being performed to include a more demographically and geographically diverse sample while addressing the extent and frequency of exposure and the level of meteorology education. Scientists hope to recognize spatial patterns and demographics behind inclement weather phobia to provide weather forecasters and media groups a better understanding of the prevalence of emotional distress associated with severe weather.
Following meteorological catastrophes in Russia, Pakistan, East Africa, and the Philippines over the past couple of years, a new report by the Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford found that better governance in these locations could have drastically lessened the devastation. The report, entitled A Sign of Things to Come, noted that food hoarding and price fixing during the 2010 Russian heat wave compounded the food shortages and even resulted in drastic increases in global wheat prices. The same year, following devastating floods in Pakistan, the report points out that landlords took advantage of those affected and estimates that these floods alone led to an 80% rise in combined wheat and rice prices. In 2011, drought-affected people in East Africa received no international or domestic aid for nearly 6 months, and the report suspects that this is due to threats posed by armed groups in the areas. During the drought, food prices reached record levels, resulting in unprecedented starving deaths, half of which in Somalia were children under 5. Following Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, this report claims that despite recent storms, local and central governments failed to understand the potential impacts of storm surge, resulting in particularly hard-hit farming communities, and that following the typhoon, women, children, and ethnic minorities were discriminated against in receiving aid. One of the lead authors of the study, Dr. John Ingram, stated that there is a need for wider cultural shifts to ensure the poorest and most vulnerable are properly protected. This goes beyond mere technical improvements to equipment or redirecting funding, said Ingram, and gets to the very heart of what climate justice should be about.
Two of the main concerns accelerating the search for affordable, sustainable energy production and use are climate change and U.S. energy self-sufficiency. The Department of Energy has released data to help energy innovators improve energy efficiency and make new forms of energy more economically viable. With electric power accounting for 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S., new companies are looking for improvements. Since commercial buildings still waste large amounts of energy, analyzing energy data together with geospatial, weather, and other open data can give a very accurate view of a building's energy consumption and ways to reduce it. Another company, O-Power, allows neighbors access to each other's energy data and allows users to compare their consumptions as an incentive to save. Data science will ease the social, political, economic, and technological issues that arise to develop solutions to a new energy future.
Recent findings by scientists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, indicate that deep ocean temperatures have not increased measurably since 2005. The study categorized deep ocean waters as those 1,995 meters and below and involved both satellite and direct ocean temperature observations. Prior to the release of this information, some speculated that warming of deep ocean waters may be responsible for the possible slowing of global warming in recent years. The scientists involved, however, have been quick to note that this information does not aim questions at climate change itself. Josh Willis, a co-author of the study, also noted that sea levels are still rising, and the study emphasizes that the temperatures of the top half of the world's oceans are still increasing. The study instead focused on the role that deep oceans play in the sea level rise that we are currently experiencing and found that they have virtually no role in the observed rise. This was determined by taking the total amount of sea level rise, subtracting the amount that was found to be due to expansion in the upper ocean and the amount that was due to added meltwater, resulting in a remainder that was essentially zero, representing the minimal amount of risk due to warming in the lower oceans.
Surfing is one of the fastest growing leisure activities, with an estimated 35 million people around the globe who regularly surf. This multi-billion-dollar industry could be affected by climate change, according to 2 studies in the journal Nature Climate Change. The Center for Australian Weather and Climate Research concluded that future storms would be more intense and potentially destructive, while the consistency of wave patterns will be reduced along the central east coast of Australia. Another study concluded that small waves will be felt in other parts of the world as well, including the North Atlantic and winter months in the North Pacific and Indian Ocean. This ocean modeling technique does predict larger waves off some coasts of Australia and New Zealand during the winter months, giving some hope for surfers. And that is all for this week's Up in the Air. We will be back in a moment with more. Welcome back to Up in the Air.
We are excited to welcome members of the Weather Risk Management Club to our show this week for the first risk report of the semester.
Josh Google and Catherine Cobalt are here with this week's report.
Welcome to our show.
Thanks for having us.
With climate change increasingly in the news these days, what is the consensus between scientists and the general public?
Surveys show that many Americans think climate change is still a topic of significant scientific disagreement. However, 97% of scientists agree that human-caused climate change is happening according to the latest AAAS report written just last year. There are many facts justifying scientists on this issue. What we know is that average global temperature has increased by about 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit over the past 100 years. Sea levels rising and some types of extreme events such as heat waves and heavy precipitation events are happening more frequently. Along with that, Arctic sea ice has been shrinking dramatically, and the rate of loss is accelerating. In September 2012, Arctic summer sea ice fell to a new record low at half the historical average, a loss in an area nearly twice the size of Alaska. The melting of Greenland and Antarctica ice sheets has also accelerated notably. Glaciers continue to melt rapidly, contributing to sea level rise and also affecting water supplies for as many as 1 billion people around the world. One of the main causes for these changes is the rise in carbon dioxide emissions. After remaining relatively stable at around 280 parts per million for millennia, carbon dioxide began to rise in the 19th century as people burned fossil fuels in ever-increasing amounts. This upward trend continues today, with concentrations breaking the 400 parts per million mark just last year.
What is the effect of climate change on everyday life across the globe?
Climate change could have significant geopolitical impacts around the world, contributing to poverty, environmental degradation, and the further weakening of fragile governments. Climate change will contribute to food and water scarcity, will increase the spread of disease, and may spur or exacerbate mass migration. Climate change can also influence resource competition and place new burdens on economies, societies, and governance intuitions. The reports call attention to the fact that these burdens can trigger violence. There is a growing recognition that the displacement of large numbers of people because of water scarcity and agriculture failure, as in the recent history of Syria, can raise tensions that lead to civil unrest.
This issue seems like a pressing problem. What, if anything, is being done to slow down climate change, or why isn't more getting accomplished?
Currently, in the U.S., the Environmental Protection Agency has been regulating greenhouse gas emissions under the Clean Air Act. Data from an April 2013 report by the Energy Information Administration showed a 12% reduction in American carbon dioxide emissions in the 2005 to 2012 period. Just over half of this decrease has been attributed to the recession, and the rest to a variety of factors such as replacing coal-based power generation with natural gas and increasing energy efficiency of American vehicles. The regulation imposed have helped but are not strict enough yet to make substantial impact on the environment.
Efforts to resolve this persistent problem are not at the level that they should be. Most people know about this problem but are not willing to trust the scientists and execute a plan. The trust between the scientists and politicians is weak. Most politicians choose to ignore the problem because there is speculation that the scientists are over-exaggerating the consequences of climate change. Some bills that have been written in favor of climate change have been passed by the House of Representatives, but get lost in legislation and never make it out of the Senate. Overall, there are many people that are not convinced of the facts, and it is hard to find political will. We are at risk of pushing our climate system towards abrupt, unpredictable, and potentially irreversible changes with highly damaging impacts. The sooner we act, the lower the risk and cost, and there is much we can do.
Kat and Josh, thanks for coming in to talk with us.
Thanks for having us on the show.
Next week, Christy and Madison will be here for your risk report.
Welcome back to Up in the Air.
We're now joined by Ryan Breton with a preview of next week's weather pattern.
Thanks very much, Heather and Meredith. That's right. This past week has certainly been kind of wet here in Happy Valley, but going forward, there are some changes in the weather pattern for next week. Take a look at this from one of our computer models. This is essentially looking at the big weather pattern at the upper levels. You can see that next week, all of these warm colors through the west indicating a big ridge of high pressure that's going to be building in through here. Now, to start the week, there'll be a bit of a trough or a dip in the jet stream through the eastern part of the United States. But there are signs that by the end of next week, all of this warmth will tend to move toward the eastern part of the nation. So the second half of next week could be warmer here in State College. Take a look at the projected temperatures for next week. The really only area of below normal temperatures will be down here through the southeast. And again, that's due to that dip in the jet stream that occurs especially during the first half of the week. But where that big ridge of high pressure is through the west, that's where we are expecting above normal temperatures through much of next week. Again, this is out through the west and continuing through much of the Midwest as well over the next couple of weeks. In terms of the precipitation, there really is no big rainmakers in our forecast here from Pennsylvania all the way through the Mississippi River Valley and to the west. Below normal precipitation throughout much of the center of the nation, again, mainly due to that big ridge or big area of high pressure dominating over the next couple of weeks. The only real area of above normal precipitation through the west will be in the Pacific Northwest, where they will have occasional bouts of rain as systems come in off the Pacific. So that is a look at the outlook for next week here on Up in the Air. Look forward to seeing you next time with another update.
Thanks, Ryan. Hopefully we get a little break from these clouds.
Definitely, I hope so too.
We'd also like to thank Josh and Kat for stopping by. We look forward to more risk reports over the next several weeks on Up in the Air.
Thanks very much for joining us tonight. I'm Meredith Fish.
And I'm Hunter Williams. See you next week on Up in the Air.